Hi, everyone around the world, and positive cheers to all of you to have a safe All Hallows Eve this weekend. I have Fluffy with me thinking about this holiday that through the centuries has changed, and sometimes with cats, without cats. That it is ironic that the history of Halloween goes all the way back to a pagan festival called Samhain, at the end of harvest and beginning of winter. And up until the 7th century AD, All Hallows Eve was celebrated on May 13th as a religious ritual, and people dressed up as saints to go door to door, exchanging blessings and gifts. And then a pope changed the date to November 1st, which has stuck through the centuries since then. But the emphasis on saints somehow turned into devils, black cats, witches, and lots of candy. And more good news tonight. We've broken through 187,000 subscribers, and hope all of you who haven't subscribed will click on that red arrow. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps Earthfiles keep growing on YouTube. And thank you to all of you who keep me updated with tweets, emails, and hard mail letters about high strangeness where you live and work. For example, on October 1st, 2021, this image from a short cell phone recording was tweeted to Drudge as, quote, an unknown aviation technology. Then, American Military News headlined this video frame on October 1st, quote, video of mysterious aircraft spotted at secret test facility and Lockheed Martin won't say what it is. But Ruben Hoffs tweeted he thought the location of the exotic-looking black craft moving on a transport rig was the Lockheed Martin Hellendale radar cross-section facility in Hellendale, California, about 325 miles southwest of Nellis Air Force Base and Area 51 in Nevada. However, recently, I was told confidentially by a credible aerospace source, quote, to be photographed like this in daylight is astonishing. That is never supposed to happen. Someone didn't put the cover-up tarp over it. Further, that reference to the Hellendale radar cross-section facility is a deflection. That black swoopy craft evolved from studying crashed UFOs in New Mexico. And I'll give you a hint. It can surf the cosmos, close quote. What that means precisely, I'm not certain. But what came to my mind was the Alcubierre warp drive pushing and pulling space, maybe like a surfboarder. And perhaps real truths are beginning to crack open from many directions now, including NASA's chief, Bill Nelson, who talked about the likely possibility of extraterrestrial life during an interview at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics last week on October 19th, 2021.
Now, I know what you've seen is what those Navy pilots saw in 2004, and there have been some 300 sightings since then. And I've talked to those pilots, and they know they saw something, and their radars locked onto it. And then all of a sudden it was here on the surface, and then it's there. And they don't know what it is, and we don't know what it is. We hope it's not an adversary here on Earth that has that kind of technology. But it's something. And so this is a mission that we're constantly looking. Who is out there? Who are we? How did we get here? How did we become as we are? How did we develop? How did we civilize? And are those same conditions out there in a universe that has billions of other suns in billions of other galaxies? It's so large, I can't conceive it. My personal opinion is that the universe is so big, and now there are even theories that there might be other universes. And if that's the case, who am I to say that planet Earth is the only location of a life form that is civilized and organized like ours?
Many American Air Force people who have served at Minuteman nuclear missile sites would agree that they have personally seen UFOs over missile sites that have demonstrated their ability to control underground missiles at will and even flip over 100-ton blast doors above underground missiles and turn over a heavy U.S. Air Force truck as if it were a toy. One witness of such astonishing chaos in a Minuteman facility is Brian Montgomery, retired U.S. Air Force senior airman and missile security policeman, now 65 years old, living in Central California. His DD-214 record of service shows that he entered the Air Force on December 11, 1974, and separated from the Air Force on December 10, 1980, after 6 years of service. He earned a Good Conduct Medal and Air Force Outstanding Unit Award for his nuclear missile security work at Malmstrom Air Force Base, serving in the 564th Missile Squadron. He witnessed high strangeness at the Carl's Minuteman Missile Site P-9, a few miles north of Conrad, Montana.
It was in November 1980. I was working a midnight shift, and I got a call to drive to the Carl's Site P-9. I got 14 and a half miles north of Conrad and just west of Highway 91. And when I arrived there, there was Security Police Special Assault Team, or SAT team. It's not on the main highway. It's a side road, like a frontage road next to where the missile site was. And the SAT team had the road cordoned off. And I pulled up, and they came up and talked to me. And I walked over there, and I saw the truck, the missile truck, and it was tipped over on its side on the side of the road. And I asked the guys where the drivers were, because there's usually two drivers. And they said a black helicopter came down and picked them up. And I don't remember ever seeing a black helicopter on the base that we were stationed at, not that I can recall. Mm-hmm. But they told me that, and the truck was on its side. The missile silo was wide open. This big blast shield door was flipped over on its side.
How heavy would that be?
The door, I looked it up, 25-ton nuclear blast door.
Wow. What in the world could have lifted up that 25 tons off and also turned over a security truck?
Yeah, I have no idea. The security truck, the way it was laying in the road, it looked like it was nice and smoothly laid. Just everything was in alignment, laying on its side.
Were there any witnesses among the military staff there? Had they seen anything?
The security policemen that were there, they didn't mention anything about seeing anything, but they did say that there was supposedly something down in the silo, and it was an open silo. I don't know if there was or not, but none of them wanted to go down in there. And I forget exactly how many people are on a SAT team. I think it's probably at least
5-ton door and turned over the security truck?
Something had them freaked out. Everybody was freaked out. They wanted me to go down because I had a pistol on my side, a 38 Special. They had M16s. And I said, well, how about if I give you the pistol and you go down there? Because there was a couple guys that were pretty adamant about me going down into the silo. And I was pretty adamant that why didn't they, because they work on them all the time. Anyway, it's kind of like a standoff, and not very long at all after that, I got a call that I had to go back to the base and go to the Keys and Codes. That's where they get the call from the president to actually launch missiles. So I drove all the way back to the base and went to the Keys and Codes all on the same night.
And what happened there?
When I got to the Keys and Codes, I pushed the button to talk to them and told them I got called to go there, told them my name and stuff, and they said just a minute. They opened the door up. I think that's a 25-ton blast door also. It took quite a few minutes for it to open. And when it opened up, I went inside, and there's a big oval table. There's like some computer maps on the wall, computers on the wall, maps all over the place. There was quite a lot of phones. There was a red phone in the middle of this table, and these two first lieutenants that were in there, and they both were armed. They were both holding pistols. And the actual keys and codes vault, that vault door was open. They asked me to go in there because there was something in there, and they wanted me to go in there and check it out.
You mean like you came from the P9 site where the security people there were afraid to go down into the silo where the big 25-ton door had been moved off at the top and the truck had been knocked over or put on the road.
Yeah.
And you're back at Keys and Codes, and people with guns inside of Keys and Codes are also alarmed, also nervous, and they're asking you to go into a vault.
Yeah. I thought it was extremely unusual.
What happened?
I went into the vault. There was lights on inside of it like there was in the main room, like a conference room looking thing. I went into this from the Keys and Codes conference room. There's another vault room that they have all the old keys and codes. The room was empty except for about 30 plastic garbage barrels, and every one of them was full of wadded up letter typing paper. And they wanted me to go in there and look around to see if it was empty or see if there was something in there.
And the security people are saying to you, even though they've got guns, that they want you to go into this room with the barrels with the wadded up paper to look for something they think is in there.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And I went in there and I looked around the back behind the barrels and kind of looked around them. There was lights on, so I didn't have to use a flashlight or anything. In there and walked back out. Told the two guys that I didn't see anything.
But you had come from the P9 site that had all of the high strangeness, and they were afraid of something down in the silo that had been able to move off the 25-ton door, turn over the security truck. Now you are back at this other building. It is strange and mysterious what is happening there. And they are concerned about something being in that building. After that night in 1980, did you ever hear any rumors on Malmstrom Air Force Base about gray aliens or any kind of non-humans being at the P9 site or being at the site where the conference table had the room with the barrels filled with paper?
No.
But you did hear about UFOs at Malmstrom.
Oh, yeah. The muddy site, yeah.
P9.
I had my own experiences with the Bigfoots a little ways up from the Giant Springs. It's on the Missouri River, about a mile and a half away from the base. And I was picking the mint that I smelled and saw it and picked it, and I accidentally picked a bunch of nettle with it, got it stuck in my fingers. I went across the street real quick to rinse it off or try to get it out on my fingers. And then I saw movement about 20 yards away, and then I saw the Bigfoot squatted down, and it was just sitting there and staring at me, sort of in the brush. So it was blackberries up in there. I think it may have been eating blackberries. I didn't even notice it till it squatted down. We got in a stare out for the longest time.
Describe what you're looking at.
A female Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, and she had reddish-brown hair, about 4 inches long. She had kind of ample breasts. There was fur all over those, too, and she had really black skin and dark eyes, like black eyes, and we just stared at each other for the longest time. She had green algae all over her back, shoulders, and the only place where there was that much algae is at the Giant Springs. That's about maybe half mile away or so. We stared at each other for a long time, and then I finally decided that I was going to go because she didn't want to move until I moved. And I kept thinking, I'm not going to walk towards it, and if it gets up, I'm going to run. But it never moved, and I just walked away from it. and thought that was the most amazing thing I ever seen in my life.
In your 6 years in the Air Force, did you ever have a briefing by anybody? It might have been a CIA intel or Air Force or somebody else about UFOs as being from someplace else in the universe that were causing problems at Minuteman missile bases?
I've heard of it. I never got briefed or debriefed on any of it. Bigfoot stuff, some of those were in the newspaper. There was a whole lot of Bigfoot sightings for a while. I remember watching your TV show,
A Strange Harvest.
Strange Harvest.
A Strange Harvest was a documentary I did for the CBS station in Denver about animal mutilations and the link to UFOs.
I remember watching, I drove all over Montana, and I had seen some cattle mutilations and talked to a couple of ranchers about them. We did talk to a couple of ranchers that were out there with their cow that would be mutilated. The rancher, he was pretty upset about it, and then there was a sheriff there too.
And that was when you were at Malmstrom.
Yeah.
Animal mutilations, Sasquatch, 25-ton doors lifted off the silo, a huge truck tipped over. It sounds like you had facets of everything that is associated with UFOs and ETs interfering on our planet.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if they're from this planet or not. To me, I think that they're interdimensional, and that we just can't perceive them with what we have to see and perceive things around us.
But you could see the Sasquatch sitting very clearly.
Oh, yeah.
We are dealing with a very different consciousness that is in the matter world, can be seen, interacts with matter, and that the UFOs do things that are impossible that human science cannot do. And so they are extraterrestrial biological entities that are more advanced than we are, and they are from someplace else in the universe.
I do believe that there's other things out there that we're having a pretty tough time comprehending.
One of the best Sasquatch photos that I have ever seen is in my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2. It was taken and I put it in my book because in all of my investigations into animal mutilations and human abductions, that Sasquatch comes up in relationship to those kinds of events taking place. And this original photograph was taken by a Forest Service employee in the Eatonville, Washington area, 60 miles south of Seattle. He is still anonymous at his request. As the crow flies from Great Falls and Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana to Eatonville in the state of Washington is about 675 miles west. Both Washington and Montana have had many sightings of Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot. Some people in the human abduction syndrome say they have seen large brownish red-haired Sasquatch inside UFO craft during abductions. Some abductees say that Sasquatch Bigfoot are a genetic creation to do work on Earth for the advanced intelligences that have been using Earth as a laboratory for millions of years. Allegedly, Sasquatch live underground in many parts of Earth, travel in tunnels that come out in habitats such as blackberry bushes over in Montana, where Malmstrom Air Force Base security policeman Brian Montgomery stared into the eyes of the red-haired, black-skinned Sasquatch female. This photograph was headlined, "Is It Really Bigfoot?" on November 9th, 1995 in the Valley Daily News, distributed in Snohomish, Washington. Snohomish is a small town surrounded by big, tall forests where many residents over the years have reported seeing 8 to 10 foot tall ape-like creatures that make high-pitched, eerie yowls. And now I want you to hear one of the best recordings I have ever heard, and the one that Art Bell loved to hear. It was sent to me by investigator Peter Gattila, who explained the Sasquatch sounds were recorded by a Snohomish, Washington resident, Linda Williford, between September of 1978 and May 1979. But the sounds continued intermittently into the 1990s. She lived 10 miles northeast of Snohomish, and the sounds occurred at night in dense forest around her house, where there had been several Sasquatch sightings. The original unedited recordings totaled 45 minutes, from which I am now going to play for you 1 minute of the eerie Sasquatch calls. Well, we had a problem with the computer, but now we're going to hear what is one of the most amazing Sasquatch sounds for the next minute. I played that same sound for people on the Laos-Vietnam border back in the first week of July 2001, who lived in the village of Villaburi, Laos, up muddy Route 9, traveling in this old Russian truck. We went from Vientiane to the DMZ border region of Laos and Vietnam, where villagers said they were seeing very tall, ape-looking wild men who could reach up 14 feet into tree branches to pull down seeds and fruit. At the village market, we showed locals a poster we made of an historic sketch of a wild man, described in a 1957 French book entitled L'homme de Néandertal est toujours vivant by Bernard Uvelman and Boris Porchnev. We wanted to see how many people would talk to us about seeing such a creature. When our crew and I played that same high-pitched Snohomish, Washington Sasquatch tape for villagers, there were lots of nods that they recognized the sound as the tall wild man, and some pointed at the poster and said, Yeti. Yeti are also described by people in the Himalaya mountains as being tall, like a humanoid primate walking on two legs as this creature left in the snow, and covered by either brown, gray, or white hair. The Hong Kong crew and I recorded people nodding at my Snohomish, Washington high-pitched yowl tape while they pointed up to the mountain above the village. That night, we all slept in our clothes on mattresses and cots in the only cement building with a second floor above the jungle, a leftover from the Vietnam War. At night, it was pitch black, no lights anywhere. At 2 a.m., on my battery-lighted watch, I suddenly woke up hearing the exact same high-pitched Sasquatch yowls coming from the direction of the mountain above us. For an instant, I wanted to call out to the dozen or so others lying asleep around me, and then I thought maybe I could quietly get to my tape recorder across the room and record. But then I knew that wouldn't work. Everyone waking up would drown out the eerie sound. So I did not move. Those extraordinary high-pitched voices of one of the world's greatest mysteries soared up and down for a couple more minutes, and then silence. And I was so grateful. So the mixture of the Sasquatch, UFOs, what military people have seen at Minuteman sites, it's all sort of woven into this increasingly complex tapestry. And what all of us need to know is, what are the real reasons why any of them are here, and what is behind all of the actions that our government tries to take to keep us from knowing nothing. So on that note, I'm so glad you're here tonight, and Chocolate has just joined, and I'm going to go to Ian to see what questions and comments we have.
Linda, thank you. We've got some super chats here, first of all. Moonbird.
Oh,
Tom
hi.
Gray. Tom Gray 4, that is. Eric Ackley, Chrissy Marr, The Seventh Son, Titania Hallam, and Peniel Land. Thank you very much for your generous donations this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I'd just like to say a few people have said thank you and congratulations on reaching 187,000 subscribers. And I'd like to remind our viewers to hit the like button and also to subscribe to the YouTube channel with the bottom right of the screen.
Yes, and I would love to know from people, in spite of the computer hang up on the first try, what your intuitive gut reactions are to that strange high-pitched sound that I used to play for Art Bell when we did Dreamland and Coast to Coast, and sometimes we would even go longer. I'd be really curious what you're feeling, what your gut feeling is to those of you out there hearing it.
Well, I'll feed back what they say in the chat, what people's responses are, but several people have reported the effects on their animals. Moonbird says his cats have just bolted, and Judith Moran says that the kitten has been spooked. Other people, Solid State Services, say the cats have been freaked out. So,
yeah, I would imagine that is interesting to see what kind of cat, dog, animal reactions there would be, and whether the human reaction is immediately fear or fascination or both.
Yeah, it seems to, a lot of people are saying this sounds quite scary and quite haunting.
Yeah, I would agree. So
Linda, okay, we can go into some questions now.
Yeah.
First of all, Linda, we've got someone who's asking, well, actually, we've got someone who's actually reported seeing a Bigfoot in their neighborhood in Oakhurst in California. And another question from someone who's on the Bigfoot and Sasquatch topic. Do you think that the government is suppressing information on the Sasquatch?
Oh, yes, along with everything else related to the UFO phenomena. And I guess I would say that one of the best speculations I've heard, not proved, but coming through many different people in the abduction syndrome over the last 40 years for me in my investigations, is that when people have seen the big 7-8 foot tall hairy creatures on a craft, they're in a round room, there are other beings, sometimes there's more than one human, and then here is what they say, this big hairy primate that from their point of view living on Earth would be a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And some of the abductees have gotten the impression that just like humans are a genetic experiment, that the Sasquatch have been made by one of the overseeing, or more than one, of the non-humans who do laboratory experiments in this planet and have for millions of years, and that the Sasquatch, like Homo sapiens sapien, Neanderthalensis, and the Denisovans, and going back to Homo erectus, that they would all be genetic experiments to serve various tasks. And that's part of the mystery. What exactly is it that the Sasquatch do? Well, when I got one of those tapes, I received also a letter, and it was from a researcher who said that there had been a tracking of very specific and unusual signals out of the Snohomish area, as if there was some kind of, at a same time in the evenings, a sending and receiving signal going out of the forest. And the suspicion that he was supplying was that the Sasquatch may be providing technological connections with whatever is their link to the UFO, and that these strange radio signals coming in and out of Snohomish might fall into that category. There's just so much that we don't know. And the issue of genetic manipulation on this planet, and who knows how many others through this vast universe, is one of the biggest of all the subjects, because apparently if there's experimentation going from solar system to solar system, galaxy to galaxy, we may find that the humanoid shape is the one that is the most universal, whether it is hairy like a Sasquatch humanoid, or it is like a human, or they're other bodies, but they have this general same humanoid shape. It may be the most common shape going through the universe. All of the things that we would like to know, and apparently there are a lot of intelligences interacting with our planet who probably know from one end of the universe to the other. And there is great interest always in planet Earth and the life above on the surface, below, underground, and in all of our vast oceans. So, what's up next, Ian?
Well, Chrissy M says, I used to live in Snohomish for years, still close, about 2 miles. I heard those same sounds about 40 acres, on our 40 acres, and it was so scary.
Did you ever record them?
Well, we'll wait and see if she responds to
Yeah.
that. Several people are saying that the effect has, the sound has also affected their dogs. They said the dogs are barking and they ran away. The dogs were hiding under the bed. So several people are reporting the effect on dogs as well as cats.
Well, let me share, so you'll have a word picture in all of your minds, as it was told to me back in the early 90s when I started working with art, first on Dreamland and then on Coast to Coast. And I started reaching out to try to find Bigfoot recordings. And Peter Gattila had this one from which we had this excellent minute that I extracted. And I was able to learn from, I think it was from Peter, that how this happened is that this woman living in that Snohomish house in the forest, over about a year's time, she had heard them, and this was a haunting but kind of almost beautiful, melancholy scene that she described as how she began her first recordings. She had heard that strange high-pitched sound. She had walked out in the back of her porch. She could see, as I recall, it was 3. And she knew how high her fence was. And based on the fence where they were standing at a corner, that they had to be about 8.5 feet tall. And they stood in this pack of 3, and she said there was silver on their dark coats, and she didn't know if that meant that they were older or it was a pattern, but she could see silver hair mixed with dark hair. And she had a tape recorder that she used for something that she had done work at the time. And she ran into her house. She got the tape recorder. I don't remember if she said it was plugged in and she kept the cord or whether it was on batteries, but nevertheless, it was just a few feet out to her little deck, and that she stood there putting the recording like this, aimed at where she could see them, and they didn't run, and she stood there like this, holding her recorder. And she did this a number of times over about a year, and that I ended up then going through and pulling out that one sort of sustained minute, and that there were others. But just think what it would feel like to be standing. She said it was maybe 200 feet to where they were from into the forest from her little back deck. But to be watching them making the sounds that she was able to record, that we all are sharing in what is in many ways is a gift. I think it's the best recordings. I don't know what the government has, but that is what has happened in Snohomish and that area of Washington and over into Canada and Montana and a lot of the Northwest have had probably the most Sasquatch encounters. And they're fascinating because who are these creatures that in a law enforcement offense report going back to 1975-76 time period, that this was also in Great Falls. And there was a rancher, it was hunting season, and he got his .30-06 rifle. And this ended up in a typed law enforcement report that I got to see and talk with Keith Wolverton at the Great Falls Sheriff's Department about this. And same Great Falls where the Minuteman missiles at Malmstrom in that area. So it's a place where the Sasquatch have been seen in many ways. And in this particular instance, why I remember it so vividly and why I called Deputy Keith Wolverton to talk with him about this back in the late 79 to 80 when I was working on A Strange Harvest, is that I had heard, and then he read from the offense report, the rancher came around a bend with his rifle, and there standing, he said, was at least 8 foot tall. He said it was a reddish brown, and I think that the rancher back then called it a gorilla, and he just brought up his .30-06, shot. And this big Sasquatch disappeared in a flash of light, and I have seen the report where in a flash of light, disappeared in a flash of light, was italicized in the sheriff's office report. Well, if you disappear in a flash of light, how can you be wholly organic matter in this dimension? And that is why I think so many people today, perhaps beginning with the work of Jacques Vallée, talk about the fact that so much of what we deal with in the UFO phenomena might be other dimensional, multi-dimensional, and that there is something about the Sasquatch that if it's shot or if something happens, that it can go back to wherever it was originally made. I mean, that is a speculation. But this is a huge box in which you have to look at all the Sasquatch stories, that not only in that case did the Sasquatch disappear in a flash of light, there was a case in Pennsylvania. When I lived in Philadelphia, I learned about this one. And this was where there were 2 women who lived also a foresty area. They heard scratching, creaking noises out on their porch at night. And it scared them. And I think one of the women went to get a gun, and the other woman walked over and opened the door and screamed and told investigators later that standing right about 12 inches from her door frame was this big, huge, hairy creature. And she screamed and went to slam the door, and the creature, in reaction apparently to her scream, turned and started sort of running off of the deck down into the ground. And the original investigators said they found scorched shapes of like primate feet on the wood of the deck, going down the stairs and out into the forest. So what would there be in a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, that would scorch wood? These are parts of the evidence that are so puzzling, but make Sasquatch, wild men, Bigfoot, Yeti, truly one of the, I think, most profound mysteries. And they seem to be all linked together to all of the other mysteries, which makes it even more fascinating. What do we have next, Ian?
Linda, were you actually afraid when you heard the Sasquatch sounds?
On the tape recorder?
No, when you experienced
when
those
I
sounds
came up the bed, no.
yourself?
No. When the first time I heard them on the tape, I remember never feeling fear, just total fascination of who are they, why are they, what is this strange looping sound? And so that night, to wake up to those sounds when that was why we were there was almost like you're on the right track. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. You're on the right track. And I think there was something comforting about knowing that something that unknown, that raw nature, could be there in Laos and Vietnam, living underground, coming up, and maybe as afraid of us as we are about the idea of creatures that we don't understand living on the planet with us, even if most of it's underground. But I found it exciting. I wanted to know more. I wanted to investigate more. And that's the impact that Sasquatch, Bigfoot has always had on me, of everything I've ever heard.
Linda, I've got some questions here, and they relate to the First Nation American stories. First of all, have you heard of any First Nation American stories of the Sasquatch language and how they were able to communicate with them?
I have heard that some of the native say that they have some people who can translate, but I personally have never met them. If there's anybody listening tonight who knows anyone who feels that they have a tradition handed down of translating sounds or Sasquatch, I would love to know more. I have talked to people in colleges and universities about the tracks, and there's a wide body of information about why the foot tracks are not Homo sapiens sapien. That is probably one of the more interesting pieces of investigation. And then the bigger question that the Sasquatch and humanity, by existing, keep ringing up. If extraterrestrial biological entities in this matter universe or other dimensionals in other dimensions have been mixing and matching genes and doing experiments on planets throughout this matter universe, other dimensions, and if there are interdimensional exchanges, the question is always why and to what end? And were we created for a very specific task, archive, I remember once talking with an abductee who said, one of the things that they showed me is that the soul of that is in humans and the DNA that is in humans are like huge archives that continue on through infinity, a concept that we have talked about before in many ways. Well, the idea that our very DNA that evolves through matter cycles of life and death and birth, that it would continue to carry the archive of everything that has been in that DNA makes sense. And that the soul, that its whole reason for being is the absorption of all experiences as a quantum energy, whether you call it a vehicle, an essence, and that its job is to gather all of the information of that soul through infinity, as if the whole reason for everything is learning through living, learning through consciousness, and perhaps being gathered by the divine field always for keeping the rest of an evolving, never finished, ever infinitely cycling, we would call it cosmos with a capital C, to include multiple universes, multiple dimensions, multiple timelines, and matter worlds. And that, I think, is at least the largest box within which one of the many mysteries are the big, tall Sasquatch, Bigfoot, wild man, Yeti that we encounter now and then on Earth. And I would love to know exactly why were they made and why are they here? Why are we here? Go ahead.
Linda, we've got Angela A says, thank you, Linda. All the dots connected. Yes, we, the First Nations people, you need to talk to us. We know. Not easy, but truth needs to be told.
Well, have her email me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com.
Will do. Another one writes, it's Linda M. She says, my dog recognized the sound from when we lived on the Yurok reservation. That's in California. She didn't like it then, and she doesn't like it now. Her hair was standing on end.
It is interesting. And I suppose, given the close relationship between humans and dogs love us, we love them. They will do almost anything to protect us. So I would say that there must be something that the Sasquatch gives out that the dogs interpret as a threat. And maybe that is where we humans have to sometimes look at our own fellow creatures on the earth. What is their reaction that would give us pause? And yet at the same time, I know there have been people in the abduction syndrome who have seen these creatures on UFOs, and some people think that they've gotten some kind of brief telepathic communication from them. There are also the examples of people at campfires. I remember one specifically, they said that there were boulders, not little rocks, boulders, that suddenly in the night while they were laughing around a fire, these boulders came out from the forest being hurled many, many feet, many of them at the same time. And they were too terrified to go into the forest to find out what it could be. And they packed up everything. They poured water on their fire, they got in the car, and they drove back to the city. And then later on, talking with people, they said that that was something that the Sasquatch, Bigfoot do, is that they will scare humans away by throwing big boulders and rocks. So that may mean that the Sasquatch don't like us any more than we are afraid of them.
Linda, do you think that some Sasquatch may be AI rather than organic?
Well, there you come back to the one that disappeared in a flash of light. Another case in Colorado. John Durr from Colorado School of Mines investigated this case with Dr. Leo Sprinkle from the University of Wyoming, who was one of the first people to take the human abduction case seriously. And they were both called to go down to a ranch in the Black Forest of Colorado Springs. And what they encountered were dozens of stories. Sasquatch walking right across their front yard at night with a full moon, electrical power interferences, dreams that everybody in the family were having weird dreams and waking up, beginning to feel terrible because they were losing sleep, not understanding what was happening. And one particular night, the father took one of his sons and took a rifle with him. And he went to an area where they had seen a beam of light or some kind of red light in the forest. And as they approached the area where the father wanted to go, he stopped because in the trees ahead, he could see that there was a silver craft. He could see tall beings that looked human. The description was blonde hair. They had, it was, I believe, it was a gray type there and a Sasquatch. And as they stopped, as the father and son stopped, they didn't know if the group would be aware of them or what would happen. But he wrote down, and it was reported by Dr. Sprinkle and Durr, that the blonde, I think that was the Sasquatch, was holding a black box and handed it over to the blonde. And the blonde being did something, lights twisted, kind of moved around or twinkled or did something. They could see the red lights. And then the Sasquatch dropped straight to the ground. And now the father with the son was so scared, they went back. They didn't know if they were going to be followed, but when he saw that happen, he just took his son back. And it's my understanding that one of the questions that was mulled around between Dr. Sprinkle and Durr and the rancher was that a machine that killed the Sasquatch, or was it artificial intelligence entirely, and that the taking of the black box by the blonde and doing something that caused all the red lights, and then the collapse of the Sasquatch to the ground? Was it something normal? Was it the way the blondes controlled the Sasquatch because there was some kind of ownership? And that comes back full circle to the same question. Was that demonstrating that the Sasquatch was entirely under the control of the blonde humanoid and fit into the category of AI that could be turned off by the black box and the red lights? No answers, but this is how complex it can all become, and who has what relationship to who. That's, wow. It's like none of the non-humans want us to know, and none of our human governments want us to know. So the general human population is always in the dark, trying to understand what's threat, what's neutral, and what's friendly. And that hasn't changed today. What else have we got?
Well, we've got someone who served at Malmstrom in 73 to 74 with the United States Air Force. I've asked them if they've got any encounter stories, so we'll wait to hear from them.
Yeah. Yes, I have gotten a lot of emails, but I thought that this story with having the Sasquatch in an area where the Minuteman missiles had those problems, that Brian Montgomery's story included a lot that a lot of people haven't read about or heard, but I have heard facets of it before. So I thought this was important to share. What other questions do we have?
Got a question here from Courtney C. She says, question for Linda, what is the strangest thing that you have ever come across?
Well, a bunch of things came into my head because there are strange things that would fall into the category of inspiration, where you will have something come into your mind that solves a problem that you have been mulling on, or for me, a lot of times writing. And it's as if, because you concentrate on something and you're trying to break through something, it's as if we are in some kind of a two-way cosmos universe. And that if we knew the truth, that our brains have a much deeper ability to resonate with the universe, and therefore to get answers in kind of a dialogue through infinity of consciousness evolving. And that the more you meditate, the more you ask for answers, and they come from the huge, huge unknown, the more it convinces me that we are more than when we hit ourselves and say we're flesh and blood with an average lifespan of a few decades. Whereas we seem to be dealing with other entities that, as one abductee said, that she got a download that the praying mantis lived long enough to oversee the creation, the monitoring, and the evolution of an entire solar system, which could be billions of years. And the idea of anything that would be in a category of cyborg, a mixture of AI and organic, or something that was organic and made in such a way that nothing would ever die or break down for billions of years, it is so foreign to human thinking. But it might also explain when Roger Penrose wrote The Cycles of Time, and when I did that interview with him back in 2018, when I first asked him what was the controversy about the singularity and what did he think, and he said, no, Linda, no singularity. We're in a vast cosmos in which it is just cycles through infinity. Cycles and cycles through infinity with no beginning and no end. And these are hard concepts for us. Go ahead, Ian. One more.
People are still talking about the connection between Bigfoot and UAPs or UFOs or the ETs. And they're also mentioning the character of Chewbacca in Star Wars.
That's right. And I've often wondered, the deeper I have been into research and thinking back of when you first saw Star Wars, that maybe Steven Spielberg had some kind of a briefing in which he was allowed to know certain truths that he's never exposed, but that in the movie, maybe some of the characters and the fact that there would be a Chewbacca, like a Bigfoot Sasquatch, as part of that crew, it may have been based on the CIA having lots of knowledge and having their own cutout offices in LA, which I know is a fact. They have done this from World War II on, after they were created in 1947, that they would have offices in Hollywood that would be made to do scripts and work in developing Hollywood features like The Day the Earth Stood Still, so that over time we have been sort of, I suppose, there's been a certain evolution through all of the Hollywood films, like Star Wars by George Lucas, and Spielberg is the 1978 encounters. I'm putting them together. And that we have sort of been exposed to a tremendous amount of content that someday somebody may do a big book about how the world was educated by Hollywood films through most of the 20th century into the 21st century before they were finally told the truth behind the Hollywood stories. I feel there's something like that we have been exposed to a lot through fiction, and that was fine because that would not be threatening. The government seemed to feel in great jeopardy about the human civilization knowing all of the truths, good, bad, and ugly. But not knowing, being deliberately kept in the dark, an entire world civilization, that doesn't change what the reality is in this universe. And it seems to me that we have reached a intersection in which all of the dots are lining up, that the very survival of humanity and Homo sapiens sapien may depend upon finally all of humanity being told all of the truth, and then dealing with the good and the bad and the ugly and scary, just like living on Earth. But now we need to expand our consciousness and what we know to be the truth to the whole cosmos that we are in, that now the estimates are at least 3 trillion galaxies with trillions of stars in each of those galaxies. There could be 1 million planets in that much that might be like Earth, all with life. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing to keep on trying to pursue and to bring as many facts as I can to you, good, bad, ugly, all of it, right here, Earthfiles YouTube channel, Wednesday nights. I love you guys. See you next week.
Turn on closed captions for YouTube videos by clicking the white CC button on the lower right. The default language for Linda's videos is English. If you would like to see the captions in another language, click on the white settings button next to the CC button. Select Subtitles CC and then select Auto Translate. Select a language, and the captions will now appear in that language.
Sort of gone through, and they will hold their heads. I never had a cat do that before. And they'll pull against the comb, helping me get out snarls. And I think it's the best they've ever been.